So I'm joined today by Mark Taylor, 35 years financial crime and compliance experience, 20 years at Goldman Sachs, CF11 of Goldman, SMF17 of Credit Suisse, in my eyes one of the names in that financial crime world, and now a partner at Ibex Consulting, or Ibex Compliance.
Ibex Compliance.
I'll give to you to tell us a bit on what is Ibex Compliance.
So Ibex, we were going to set it up 5 years ago before I joined Credit Suisse, but we kind of bottled it. But I've worked with Sung, who was at Goldman's with me, and latterly at BNP for many years. And we just wanted to get into the consultancy space on financial crime compliance and compliance. So we set a small firm up 2 years ago, a year ago. And yeah, we're having a lot of fun doing it. We're working with clients, advising them on financial crime problems, recruitment problems, compliance issues, and having a lot of fun doing it.
Sounds good. But the point and the premise of what we're trying to do is answer some of the questions that we get asked, but rather than me making up what I think is the right answer, get industry experts to give those answers back to people. And in that guise, I want to focus on kind of the journey through a financial crime career. And one of the things I'm asked all the time is, if you're starting a career in financial crime right now, is it better to try and get a generalist role and try and learn a bit of everything? Or is it better to be an expert in one piece? Sanctions, policy, EDD, fraud, transaction monitoring? How would you guide people?
It's difficult. I mean, you need to know what you're talking about, I guess it is the first thing that I would say. I always swore I would never be a money laundering reporting officer or work in financial crime compliance. I was kind of pushed into it and found that I really enjoyed it. So I didn't come from that background at all. I actually think that was helpful because it allowed me to challenge the normal ways that have become embedded in doing things. And I've often tended to recruit people from outside the space. I think, you know, if you are a sanctions expert now, you're not going to be able to work. I think you should always have an eye to the other areas of the department because they're relevant. If you're dealing with a sanctions issue, you're going to have to know about KYC, you're going to have to know about client work, you're going to have to know how your program works. So whichever area you're in, give a thought and have a constant eye to how the rest of the program is working. And then I think you can go far in financial crime compliance.
Mm-hmm. And if you become a specialist, like you referenced sanctions there, you're not going to be able to work with everything that's going on. But say I've been in sanctions for 10 years now and I want to transition into something else. You're at Credit Suisse, you're at Goldman's, you're wherever you've been. When my CV lands on your desk for a policy role or for a differential type of role, how do I get myself noticed by you? Because surely you read my CV and say you're close, but you're not quite right.
I tend not to do that. I actually, if you do that, and it was me in charge of the department, I actually like that approach. I guess not everybody does. I think it's easier to move around at the firm you're at. Mm-hmm. And I think having those conversations, I'll go back to the sanctions process. You need to understand who your clients, you couldn't work in the sanctions area and not know the KYC issue. Yeah. You'd struggle if you didn't know how the investigations work, and you'd struggle if you weren't good at investigations. So those things are easily transferable. And I think people can see that. So I think my wife's a careers advisor, so she would agree with this. I think you need to tailor each of your applications to meet the job that you're applying for. Yeah. So if you're applying for an investigations job and you worked in sanctions, you need to explain the investigative work that you've done. But you would have done that. Yeah. You would have had that experience.
So when you're looking at CVs from other area, is there things that people can have done outside of the day-to-day that stand out to you? Like you said you hire often from outside of financial crime.
And outside of compliance, actually.
So what kind of areas do you target?
So I'm interested in people who've got good CVs and have achieved things. Mm-hmm. So successful people, high-flying people, if they've worked outside of compliance, but they've got an inquisitive mind, if they interview well, if they're thoughtful, if they've done the research about what financial crime compliance is, and if their career has been successful in the space they're in a number of cases, I've given those kind of people an opportunity, and in many cases that's been really successful. There are obvious areas, like if you're a trader, you can move into surveillance. Those are easier transitions, I think,
Yeah.
but you still need to learn about investigations.
Yeah, okay. And so what kind of backgrounds could work? We often get police force.
Police, military, intelligence, accounting, law, all of those things transfer easily. But again, it's enthusiasm. You know, I love the idea that somebody who's worked in a totally different industry, gets a qualification in criminology or financial crime compliance, or does a particular qualification, and that shows an enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And then I'm excited by that person. They really want to move into that area. And there's two things about financial crime compliance which I ignored when I was saying I didn't want to work in it. One, it is really, really interesting. And obviously it's doing a good thing. You know, you're actually, if you do it well, you can stop a criminal activity happening.
Yeah.
That's an achievement, it's good. So it feels good to work in that space. It's exciting, and you need enthusiasm. Underpinning all of this, and this is true with compliance as well, is common sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can make sensible, some of this is really obvious.
Yeah.
And on top of common sense is communication. So you need to be able to explain why somebody can't do something, or why somebody needs to do a particular thing in terms of a process or a policy. And people have short attention spans. You need to be punchy in the way you communicate.
Yeah. So for me, the CV is kind of the key to the door, and a lot of the things you've made reference to then are in interview, right? If I get the chance to get in front of you, there's a chance that I can sell my background to you. But when I've just got that piece of paper, it feels really hard to do. So when we're talking about tailoring applications, and if I'm coming from outside of the industry or a different part, whether that's legal, whether that's finance, the other bits and pieces you've mentioned, when I'm tailoring my CV, how do I stand out to you? I have to talk about what I've accomplished in relation to the important parts of the job spec, whether I've been involved in investigations, or I have to talk about the successes I've had within my world and how I view that as transitioning across, or?
Why do you want to work for A, the firm
Yeah.
that I'm working for,
Yeah.
and B, in the space that I'm in? I think that's absolutely key.
Yeah.
I think if you've gone from a particular role in a different industry to thinking I want to work in financial crime compliance, there'll be a reason, and that will be a sensible path for you. So explain it.
Yeah. Okay.
And don't make it up.
Yeah. And you mentioned the qualifications piece. If I go and sign up for ACAMS or for CSI or for anything money laundering related or focused, or even economic crime related or focused, or anything in and around the space, fraud, etc., is it the knowledge that I'm getting from doing that, or it's the demonstration of the fact that I'm willing to spend my own money, or it's the fact that I'm showing I'm committed with my time, or it's...
I don't particularly need the qualifications to hire the person.
Yeah.
But if you do something, and it doesn't have to be a qualification, that demonstrates your enthusiasm for this job that you're applying for, that helps me.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because we're often asked by people, should I sign up for qualifications? And I don't deny, a lot of the time I say, if it's important for your job, the firm that you work for will pay for it, right? Yeah. But if you're out and you're trying to make a transition, you've got to do something that makes you stand out from everyone else. Because if we put up a job spec that says open to applications from any kind of background, we get overwhelmed. So how do you stand out and how do you make a difference? Is there other stuff that makes a difference outside of qualifications? Is coding helpful in this modern world?
I don't think it depends which area you want to work in. I don't think you need to code to work in financial crime compliance. I suspect as technology moves on and AI develops further and further, you won't need to code to work in financial crime compliance at all. Again, if you can explain why you did it and why you think it's relevant, it can be anything like that shows enthusiasm and is helpful. When you're sifting through multiple different CVs to choose one person. But really, the crisp bit is, why do you want to work in financial crime compliance, and why do you want to work for the firm that you're applying to? To me, it's that specific. And that second one, if you work for a particular investment, how does it make money? Do you understand that? And is that interesting to you? And those are the kind of questions that I'm like.
And from the experience you've had talking about the type of firm, is there a big difference between someone wanting to be successful in a big American bank or the kind of personality profile that works for a big European bank or for a smaller house? Like, in my eyes, on the recruitment angle, the culture of these places is so vastly different from firm to firm to firm. You've got to find the one that you best fit with, as well as searching for the role itself.
The cultures are, I mean, I've only worked for two, and the cultures of those two were hugely different. I guess, you know, when you spend 20 years working in one firm, you tend to bring a bit of that culture with you, and that's possibly why you get recruited. And so your team ends up having a flavour of the previous place. Hopefully, you also look up and take on board the different approach and the different culture in the new firm, and so you get a bit more of a blend. I think the more you know about the person interviewing you, the better you're going to interview. The more you know about the firm you're interviewing for, the better you're going to interview. If you can have a coffee with someone who works at that firm, it's helpful. You know, find out who Mark Taylor is, how does he. All of those things are helpful. How many interviews am I going to have? Because you know the Goldman's model was a lot of interviews, and the Credit Suisse model was less. It's good to know that and understand and think. I wonder why that is.
And on that vein, I want to ask that question. Why do you think that is? From my angle, on a recruitment perspective, I often think the firms that have these longer processes are testing the resolve of the individual. Like, are you willing to find the time outside of your day job to commit this time to us? Because when you get here, expectation is this is going to be a full-on job, if that makes sense. There are certain firms that we work with that can be anything up to 15, 20 interviews, and there's a lot of others that do things in 2 interviews. Do you think the interview process dictates the future, or what's the reasoning for it in your eyes?
So there's 2 things, and actually I'm now going to demonstrate the blended approach that I was referring to previously. I think lots of interviews, in my experience, helps you really find out what the client's like, but it also allows the interviewee is like, but it also allows them to see you. And I think that's really important. So if at the end of that process they want to work with those people, that's great. And I have no stats to back this up, but I just think it makes a better hire. That being said, when I'm trying to hire someone, I need someone in the sanctions team, and I'm in a rush. Boy, am I really glad to flex that to 3 interviews instead of 15, and I'll take that risk if I think that's right. I've got a lot of time for the longer process, but circumstances don't always allow you.
Yeah, makes sense. You mentioned AI recently, a couple of questions back. Do you think that's coming for financial crime? Is there wholesale change?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you are not using basic AI tools and finding out what they're doing, you've got a problem. And as someone who is the age I am doing that. I'm loving playing with these things. But we're finding them useful. We're finding them useful to help us write policy documents, to help us review our own work. We don't cede control to an AI tool, and I personally don't think that will happen. But they're very useful. You can draft something in 3 minutes instead of 3 days. And you have to own what you dispatch, what you give to people. So you still have to do a lot of work on top of what it does. But it means that you're not draining yourself trying to start something off. You always got a very easy baseline. Now you've got that tool, it's really useful. I mean, what it can do in terms of surveillance and review work, drafting reports, from your surveillances, from your investigative work. I mean, it's a very, very powerful tool, and it's going to make a difference. What I hope it does is it gets people. There's a lot of stuff in financial crime compliance, and it's not all good. So people are applying for these jobs. It's fantastic areas to work. You're doing good things. Everything I've said, but there's a lot of mundane drudgery work
Yeah.
in the job. And so you've got a lot of highly qualified people weighed down by a lot of stuff. And the regulator won't allow any mistakes. It has no time for any mistakes, which we can talk about. So it's not a risk-based approach, so you have to get everything right. So that's why these processes and these jobs have a lot of stuff in them. AI can really help to reduce that and get people to focus on what really matters, which is the investigations, the diligence, the financial crime work.
Is that a mindset then for people in the role? Like, well, one of the frequent discussions me and my wife have is the different personality types we have, where she's a perfectionist and likes to do everything and make sure everything's 100% correct and done. Whereas in my eyes, done is better than perfect, if that's the right way to phrase it. Just thinking on the reflection point of...
Perfection is the enemy of the good.
Exactly that, exactly that. But if the regulator tolerates nothing, then I'm the wrong personality type to go into a financial crime focus role. Is there specific types of...
Actually, you're not. I mean, you're both right, in a way. Recruit you both.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you need to be a perfectionist in the work that you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's a shame. I think in designing the program, you need to be a perfectionist. Perfection is the enemy of the good. Otherwise, you won't get anything off the ground.
Yeah.
But you need to be cognizant, and we get on to things like data. You need to be cognizant of where your errors can be, and you know, firms. I wrote a piece a couple of days ago and was speaking at a conference, and we were talking about data. And you go, really? I mean, our firms still not got complete data sets for clients or for transactions? And the answer is no, they haven't. And that is remarkable. It remains a problem, but it means that the perfectionist has a place. But you'll never change, you'll never get these systems to focus on actually catching criminals if all you do is look at the detail.
Yeah, makes sense. And then within the role itself, how important is it to actually understand exactly what the business itself does? Like you're focused on sanctions, for example, you're focused on transaction monitoring, for example. But if you're working in a public equities firm, or if you're working in a public fixed income trading house, do you need to understand the intricacies of the detail of the products and what's going on?
Well, if people... So if you are, I mean, the answer to your question is yes. There's, you know, how long is a piece of string is the next piece to it. If you're just clearing level 1 alerts in a surveillance, is it essential that you know the fine intricacies of swap trading, etc.? I'm not entirely sure. I'd always feel much more comfortable if someone doing that job did understand that. If you want a career in financial crime compliance, you've got to understand the business, and lots of people don't. So if you want to get an advantage, if you want to be the person that impresses and gets promoted, then understanding the business, so not only understanding your business, but being close to the business so that they understand you, they like you, they understand your job, you understand their job, spend time with them. And it's less true with compliance, I think, and maybe people won't agree with that. But financial crime compliance is of interest. So when you talk, it's like an interesting thing. So you can talk to a trader, you can talk to the head of equity sales, because they want to know what you do, because they're worried about it. Some of these fines are huge. So there's always an in to have these conversations, and I think it's essential. And the more you can learn, you know, if you can spend some time on a trading desk, if you can read up about how things work, it's vital. If you're doing, if you're working at the investigative end of sanctions or surveillance and you don't understand the business, you will not be able to do your job. You might think you can, but you won't be able to.
Yeah. And in that, guys, how easy is it then to transition? Like, you had 2 huge jobs with investment banks. Could you have been a retail bank MLRO?
Well, I was, but in the investment bank.
Gotcha. Yeah.
and fund manager as well. It's actually doing all of those 3. The investment bank always had a stronger pull. I guess they were bigger.
Yeah.
or at least bigger in the UK where I had the responsibility. But yes, I think you can, absolutely. So, you know, we are now working with lots of different organisations, and that's fine. But you have to, back to the answer to the previous question, you have to understand what the business is doing.
Yeah.
And back to the interview question.
Yeah.
How do they make money?
Yeah.
And you need to understand that.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're doing surveillance, if you're doing investigations, you have to a bit chase the money. And a lot of people in these jobs don't always do that.
Well, and what about something like same but different, like a large commodities, a physical commodities house that are shipping oil all around the world? The job changes.
Well, the things that firms can do, and the things that clients can do with different instruments are different.
Yeah.
So if you were working in equities and you moved to an oil trader, it's different.
Yeah.
The rule sets are different. You've got to, I mean, I haven't mentioned rules. That's interesting, isn't it? We've got this
100%.
far and I haven't mentioned it. You need to know your rule sets.
Yeah.
So if you didn't understand the rule set for that particular commodity or that business or that country, where you need to put some time in so that you did, and spend some time with people understanding what the rules are. Committing market abuse is done in different markets in different ways.
Yeah.
So you need to understand how that works and the different opportunities for doing that. That being said, if you follow the model, if you understand the rule sets, if you understand the business, if you sit down with traders, if you sit down with the head of sales, if you get so that you understand how the business works, you'll be able to do that job.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So for someone looking to fast track a financial crime career, reading is almost the route, if that makes sense, right? If I'm doing whatever, I'm 5 years in and I'm a specialist in one piece, for me to transition, I could do a qualification and learn some more stuff, but ultimately I could go and read, learn the rules, discover more about the business, discover more about other types of business, and follow the path of knowledge getting me there, if that makes sense, right?
Totally. There are lots of. The reason my face went blank is he's going to ask me which books to read.
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember any of the titles. But there are lots of good books about money laundering.
Yeah.
Read them. Yeah. Because they're really interesting. They're fun. Read about oligarchs. Read about Russia.
Yeah.
Read a bit about the politics in these countries.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got a business that's making money in Africa, or trying to, has you know, African clients, then understand which country, understand how it works. They're all different.
Yeah.
It's really important to understand that difference. You know, hire people who may understand the client base a bit better as well is another thing to think about. And you know, if you therefore have that knowledge, you can address it towards getting a job. And also fast track. You know, people who've worked here for NGOs, people who've worked in due diligence businesses are really good hires for financial crime compliance.
Yeah. It's interesting you reference that. We've been doing some due diligence recruitment recently, and I find them to be some of the most honest candidates we've engaged with. And when I say that, we've got firms saying, listen, we need to bring someone in and they need to do everything globally. And we're speaking to people in some of the larger due diligence houses that are like, well, it's impossible, right? I'm an expert on this part of the world or this specific piece. It's impossible to have that coverage. Now, I guess reading and learning is the route for them to grow, but realistically, there's probably not enough time in the day to be an expert on it all. Or...
You can never know everything.
Yeah.
But you can have a specialism and you can work on other things. And you know, if you're writing due diligence reports, it will mean that someone has challenged the way you write, and you will write good reports if you're building a career in that space. And you'll come over and someone will hire you because you've worked with you know, a particular jurisdiction and that client base. But what they'll really like about you when you settle in is how you write, how you present, how you summarize, because the MLRO is going to be looking at, you know, 50 of these things. And you know, I'm kind of glad I'm not doing that job now, but I used to worry about missing things. And you know, you can read things, you can drift off, but you've got to read it. And so you want people who can make sure that you don't miss the important kernel of information.
And is that where AI is a worry? People using it as a fast track? Give us a summary of this rule, or give me an overview of whatever the fears of ABC in X country.
Well, that's not about AI, that's about someone not doing their job properly.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that people understand how to do their job properly.
Yeah.
And if I hand you a report, I've written it.
Yeah.
So you fire me, you don't fire the AI.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that is a really important message. I don't care if AI wrote it.
Yeah.
But I care that you checked it.
Yeah.
And you were very comfortable and owned what you gave me.
Yeah. And in that, guys, when I talk about fast tracking a career in financial crime, is financial crime almost the one area that you don't want to fast track a career because you need to know everything, or you need time to learn other things?
That's a great question. People can move from other interests, from other industries and other businesses into a senior role in financial crime compliance because they have good communication skills, because they are analytical, and because they because they are thorough in what they do, if they're enthusiastic in this space. So I don't think you need to dwell. I don't think you need to work in all the different functions before you can manage them. I certainly didn't. I think it's interesting. I mean, I think if you are in the client space, so if you're doing the kind of due diligence investigations, then spending a bit of time there is good. Because if you have the history, which you can learn in different ways, you wouldn't need to spend 10 years working EDD or something. But although that wouldn't hurt. But if you have that family tree knowledge around clients, if you know a bit of Russian history, if you know about the jurisdictions that you're in, it's really helpful.
Yeah, makes sense. In that, guys, obviously most people push to make it to be top of the tree, right? SMF 17, etc. I need to fact check this, but I read something the other day that said in the last 3 and a bit years, the regulator's written to over 600 firms because they've had more than 3 MLROs in 3.5 years. Why are so many people leaving their jobs?
The last firm, I was at the last, in my last job as an MLRO for 5 years. I think they had 13 MLROs in the last 5 years before that, or some statistic, maybe it was 5 in 13, I can't but it was a lot. So first of all, the jobs are really difficult. And there is a regulatory responsibility. Actually, I used to major on the regulatory responsibility, and don't get me wrong, it's there and it's important. But MLROs don't tend to get fined by the regulator historically. It's a possibility. You should worry about it. But I think you can do that job and worry a little less about that. I think sometimes you'll notice that compliance officers are often on the board and financial crime compliance MLROs aren't. I think that's problematic. So I guess people sometimes feel that they don't have a voice, and if you're going to take on the job, you need to make sure that you have that voice. That's as much to do with you as a person and the way you communicate and how you interact with people as it is to do with the way the firm is structured. Everybody should be able to work in a matrix management environment. That being said, sometimes the pieces of the matrix don't always help in that regard. So try to find out how that's going to work for you. If someone very much more senior than you hands you the MLRO role, and you feel as though that's a massive leap for you, it probably is, and you shouldn't be doing it, and they should be doing it. I do worry about that juniorization. So sometimes don't rush to take the role. So with all of those, it's about structure, it's about responsibility, and it's about making sure that you can be heard. In these big roles, you need to make sure that you get on well with the non-execs, you need to be at the board, not all the time, but you certainly need to be presenting to the board regularly. And if you feel as though you haven't got access, it's a problem. I've sometimes shown boards a little bit more of their risk than they wanted to see, and that creates a huge tension. But in that conversation, you find out who your friends are, and find out whether you're doing the job properly, and scope how to talk about those risks. That's really important. It's not an easy role.
Yeah.
I mean, don't be a junior doing a role that where you can't get your voice heard.
Yeah, makes sense. We, from time to time, when we're recruiting new MLROs into firms, there's a suggestion that someone else will hold the SMF17 for a period, right? 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Doesn't tend to be more than 1 year that people talk about. But the discussion is always twofold, right? We don't want to go to the regulator and say, hey, this is our new person if it doesn't work out either way. But also for the candidate going in, it's a chance for you to look in the cupboards and under the floorboards. Having done everything you've done before, how long does it actually take to go into a role and have a look around and feel comfortable that you could take on the 17?
Well, part of that should be addressed in the interview process. So I think if you only meet one person, that's not great.
Yeah.
You need to have met your key stakeholders before you take that job.
Yeah.
So that'd be the first thing. If you go straight into the SMF17 role, as I've done, then you should really have got yourself comfortable within 100 days, and ideally have written a report summarising how you got comfortable. It's easy to write the report. It's easier said than done to actually get completely comfortable.
Yeah.
And in explaining how you got comfortable or not, and the or not is interesting. There's obviously a lot of tension at that moment when you go into writing. So you need to be able to manage that tension. Obviously, if you had to sink the ship because it was in a really bad place, then you need to feel comfortable. You could do that. But most of the time, there's a tension. They've got some clients that you don't think they should have. They think some of them are okay.
Yeah.
It's a bit of argy-bargy around it. And you need to get through that in your first 100 days. If it helps, I think a senior person should be able to go straight into the role.
Yeah.
If you're not going straight into the role, you're still going to have to do that.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit harder if you've got some kind of secondary ownership for the client base, and you didn't say anything in the first year you were training or whatever the period is. It's going to be harder to say, well, hang on a second, I don't like these clients.
Yeah.
So there's some oddities that come out of that training. So if you're the deputy MLRO and you're going to the MLRO role, it's harder to kind of blow your own work up.
Of course.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, when you reference senior, what do you mean? Been the 17 before, or?
No, it's a senior hire. Obviously, clearly it helps to have been the SMF 17, and I went into the SMF 17 at Goldman's from an SMF 16 role, albeit a narrower one. And so I had some idea how all of that worked.
Yep.
And I'd worked with the previous MLRO as a compliance officer, or in my compliance officer capacity. But yeah, I think if you know you're going to go into that role, to be honest, you might as well go into it straight away.
Yeah.
And write the report.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm just trying to understand the different scenarios there. So imagine, whatever, I've been a SMF 16 for 20 years. I've always had financial crime report up into me, and someone's been the 17, but I've never done any of the physical work myself, but that individual's always reported to me. I've got the chance to get a new job somewhere else, but they want me to take the 17 on day one. Having had the seniority of the other side, I should feel comfortable, or?
Oh yeah, I think you should, you should feel comfortable about doing the job.
Yeah.
And you should know that you're going to write a report in 100 days that summarise what you found.
Yes.
Some of which won't be great.
Yes.
And as long as you're comfortable doing that, it's fine.
And that reports to the regulator, or that's to the board, or that's?
The report would be available to the regulator, but it should go to the board. it should certainly go to your direct manager, who probably is on the board,
Yeah.
will be on the board. And I think you don't have to write that report, but I think you should.
Yeah. And in your eyes then, from some of the bits you mentioned before, if we go back, whatever, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, etc., you're interviewing for an SMF17 role somewhere externally, and as a part of the process, you don't meet anyone from the business.
Disaster.
Red flag, walk away, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, ask to meet them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. As silly as it sounds, less and less. Well, I'm 20 years in recruitment. When I first did it, candidates would have 2 or 3 interviews and then would regularly say to us, do you know what? Either something top level or low level I haven't covered. So could I go and meet someone super senior to have a chat about strategy or whatever? Or could I actually just go and meet a couple of people in the team to understand whether they're happy, whether they're unhappy, what the culture is. It seems to happen less and less. I don't know if that's society and we're all in a rush to do everything or whatever, but we get asked less and less, actually, as the candidate, can I add some steps to that process? But that's something you'd see as a positive or negative.
Yeah, when I interviewed, I met the head of the investment bank and the head of the private bank.
Yeah. And if you were the hiring manager and someone asked
And
you...
actually, I didn't meet the head of the asset manager. And the asset manager was, I think, correctly, a bit annoyed.
Yeah.
That they hadn't met me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's one of the things we get asked all the time by clients. Clients say to us, like, how many is too many? Because there's 10 people in the business that would like to meet someone for a senior role, but we don't want to waste all day, every day and get everyone involved, if that makes sense. So,
It can be half an hour.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a 3-hour thing.
Well, we push nowadays the balance between online and face-to-face, right? Like if you've got 10 people outside of the 6 that you said were in the process, what's the harm in those 6 doing face-to-face proper interviews as expected and the other 10 doing half an hour online and having that discussion?
Definitely.
Yeah. Is there anything else that's a red flag for you on the way in? Anything that you do or don't get asked, or?
Some of this is, you're trying to get facts. So gut feel is a hard thing to explain. But I think you need to feel comfortable with the people that you meet. They can't always tell you what the regulatory issues are.
Yep.
And you want them to, but to be fair to them, they can't. So you're going to go in, you're going to discover that there are some regulatory things that you didn't know about. You need, don't move jobs if you're not comfortable with that. You are going to find that, and you're going to have to come to terms with it. That's why I say the way you protect yourself is you tell them during the interview process, because if they don't want you to write a 100-day report, then don't go there. But if you write the 100-day report, to be fair to my last employers, they didn't have the process of writing a 100-day report. I discussed it with them as we were going through the interview process. Not only did they welcome the report, but they changed the process so that anyone coming into a senior managerial role would have to do the same. And to me, you've got to protect yourself. So I've done a review, I've spoken to all these people, I've found out how it works, this is what I've found. So the regulator knows you're serious, you did a decent job. And if there is something wrong, you've got that short period of time to flag it. And if you don't see it, ouch. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Is there anything else that you can guide or advise people on ways to grow or develop quicker? Would a coach be worthwhile? Would a mentoring program be worthwhile? I'm a massive fan of mentoring. Yep. What does mentoring mean to you? Well, so I think it's good to have someone who doesn't work in your area, but who works in the firm, ideally who is a little bit more seasoned, senior than you are, so that you can, talk about things that are annoying you, things that are anything, just out of your area. Yes. It's nice to talk to the people that are sitting next to you, and obviously you do that anyway. But sometimes it's good to break out, go and have a coffee with someone and just chat. I also don't mind mentoring for political reasons, so why not? If you want to get into the sanctions space, why not ask the head of sanctions to be your mentor? Why not? And they'll tell you how to do it. And that's very helpful. And you can do that to a very senior level. I've had junior people on my teams with really senior mentors, and you kind of go, whoa, that's great. But actually, why not? It's great. It's great for them. It's great for you. It keeps you on your toes too. that what I've just described is the navigation that comes from trying to find out how the business works, trying to find out how the firm works, trying to find out how the culture works.
Yeah.
And mentoring is just one element of that. But I think sometimes you need to let off a bit of steam, and not too much. But it's good to let a little bit of steam off with a mentor.
Yeah.
And a good mentor, will allow you to do that. You get some good advice from them, and a good mentor will also say, we've had 5 coffees, it's been great, but you need to go to another mentor now.
Yes.
And that is also okay.
Yeah. Oh, well, I personally believe everyone should have counselling of some sort, if that makes sense.
So otherwise, we could talk about that for a long time.
100%, but it is, because otherwise you build stuff out and it's a chance to let it out. What about external coaching?
Well, look, I never turned down help, so why not?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of bad counsellors. There are a lot of good counsellors. There are a lot of bad coaches. There are a lot of good coaches. You need to feel comfortable that you're getting value, particularly if you're paying for something. You need to understand why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And I think if you come away from those sessions disappointed, you've actually doubled bad.
Yeah.
Then you don't get what you want. It doesn't take you to where you want to go to. I do think you can get so much from talking to people, taking people out for coffees. If you don't know how the equity sales process works, go out for a coffee with a head of equity sales or someone in equity sales. Why not? Or 5 people in equity sales. At some point, you'll understand how it works.
Yeah.
And then you'll have 5 people in the business that when there's an issue, you can just go, do you know what? I'm looking at this. Can you help me? And they do. Because the other thing is, you won't ever get to the top if you don't do what I've just done, which is go, can you help me?
Yeah. And as a junior, that's pretty intimidating, right? I want to learn about equity sales. I'm a AVP at whatever bank. Do I have the courage to go and ask that question, or should I target someone?
To another AVP, you should have.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. To a VP, you should have.
Yeah.
So kind of make yourself do it.
Yeah. But I think that's the useful advice, right? It's about realizing that even if you're at one level and you fear whatever title, there's no reason that you can't speak to someone one title up and still gain for where you're set right now.
There are, in the world, there are unhelpful people.
Yeah.
But I've found mostly everyone's trying to help.
Yeah.
So they all want the same outcome.
Yeah.
So mostly people want you to succeed. So if you ask for help, they'll give it to you.
Yeah. I always think that when you do a best man's speech at a wedding, people get nervous, but actually everyone there wants it to be successful. Yeah, exactly. Everyone wants it to be good. Any other advice or guidance you can give then? If I'm sat there watching this and I'm thinking to myself, do you know what? I really feel ready for my next steps. I'm going to go and try and get a coach or a mentor, someone internally to help me. I'm going to go and do some reading. I'm going to go and learn further. But is there anything else that you could guide us towards? Yeah,
so after giving all of that advice, don't over-engineer it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're excited about doing a role, that's going to come through.
Yeah.
If you've read 100 books, it won't trump the excitement that you feel about doing that role. And if you don't feel excited about the role, you should, I haven't always enjoyed the jobs that I'm doing. I've actually probably always enjoyed the jobs I'm doing, but I haven't always enjoyed bits of the jobs I'm doing. And, if I look back on it, you could have made a change at that point.
Yep.
You could have done something about that. And I think that would have been good. So I don't think you should be frightened about raising a concern. And if I'm running a team of 60 to 100 people, then I try certainly to engage with as many people as I possibly can on the team that I work with.
Yeah.
But you can't always do that. So anyone, helping you, raising an issue to, if I've got, 8 managers and they've got people below them, if one of those managers goes, I've been speaking to these people and I've got a slight concern about this, that's really helpful. So nothing is perfect and no manager is perfect.
Yeah.
We all need all the help we can get, basically.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking ahead, like whatever, I'm planning 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years. I want to grow, I want to develop, I want to get my promotions. What's the future of financial crime like? AI is coming, some things are getting offshored. Is there anything specifically that I'm best to guide myself towards, or?
You need to be flexible. I'm sitting here having had a 35 career, as you kindly pointed out. The job I ended up doing wasn't even invented when I started work.
Yeah.
And so you can do too much planning.
Yeah.
And you can't predict the future. It's good to look up, so the AI point is relevant.
Yeah.
Understand it, embrace it, find out how it can help you. Don't spend too much time worrying that it's going to eliminate your job. Work out how to use it, because if the people around you haven't, then it will eliminate them and not you. So I think be inquisitive, find out, ask questions. If there's a promotion, there's a short-term piece to this. If you want to be a partner at a firm and you've just joined it, then that's lovely. But time will tell.
Of course.
If you want to become, if you want to go to the next rung up, find out how the process works. Speak to the people who are involved in it. Ask your manager how that happens. They might look a bit surprised when it's your first day, so probably do it on your second month. But why not? Ask it on the second month. Find out how the process works. Find out what you're supposed to do, and do that. Don't focus on being promoted, though. Focus on doing your job properly. Because if you don't get promoted and you think you've done a great job and all your appraisals say you've done a great job, then the organisation isn't working for you. But if you do a great job and your appraisals say you've done a great job and you get promoted, then you probably will one day find yourself as a MD or partner.
Is each of those promotion levels harder to achieve? It's, well, if it happens to you, it happens to you, I suppose. They're obviously harder to achieve because the pyramid narrows. But if you work at an organisation quite a long time, people leave, so that the narrowing happens anyway. And so I think my advice holds. You carry on doing a good job, you carry on getting good appraisals, it'll come. If you do a good job, if you think your appraisals are wrong and you don't get an explanation, then either you're wrong or your manager's wrong. The organisation isn't working for you. Probably time to go. If your appraisals are great and you're not getting promoted, something's wrong. But your manager should be able to explain, and the firm should be able to explain why that has happened. So work with that. If you can't work through that, then leave. But if you're hitting all the right targets, doing everything properly, then you will get promoted. It's not a bad idea to look at other opportunities. So if you think, well, someone who joined at the same time as me and worked in investigations is now a VP and I'm not, then look at another area. If you feel that you're being selected, because that can be a capacity issue, or there's already 2 VPs and it shouldn't be, but sometimes that happens. So moving around doesn't hurt. If someone presents you with an opportunity, so I became an MLRO because someone kind of put a bit of pressure on me, but they did that because they thought it was an opportunity for me. And if someone's doing that, you should probably take it. And then from our side, that comes back to the point you made about asking the question, because one of the things I do see frequently is people get trapped at VP or director level, get frustrated, whatever, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, still in the same role, still can't get that promotion, but have never asked the question about how they get it. And when they go and ask the question about how they get it, they get told, well, actually, the job that you're doing, you are the one VP for transaction monitoring in this entire institution, and we've never had a director doing it. And until you're managing a team, which is never going to happen because we don't have the headcount, you can't get that promotion.
That's a terrible firm, by the way. As soon as that, you have that conversation, in my view. But
that's a frequent discussion we have with people across all of the banks. And ultimately, it's because they haven't asked the question, or because the firm hasn't dictated to them how you do things. But actually, the advice our end is, as much as you're coming to us saying, I want to get their next director, a lot of firms won't hire cross-title, right? If you're a VP, promote cross-title. If you're a VP, you're not getting a job as a director at one of the rivals. That's just the way it works for a lot of firms.
I think trying to jump ship for a promotion doesn't always work. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I think first of all, what I'm saying is find out how the process works in your second month, not in your 10th year. And then work to that. If I look at all of the fabulous kind of interns that came into the compliance program at Goldman's, they've all done well. Some of them spectacularly well, and you just kind of knew that was going to happen. And they're, some of the compliance interns are, well-known economists and are on the telly, and people have moved and done lots of different things. So you need to be enthusiastic about your own career.
And I think that's the thing. The
if
advice,
you sat around for 10 years, you didn't deserve to get that job.
Oh, I can see that the advice from our end is sometimes actually that sideways step is a promotion, because the intellectual stimulation and the enjoyment you can get out of doing and feeling refreshed and go again, if that makes sense. And ultimately, when you feel engaged and energized and enthused, and the intellectual, whatever, the grey matter starts moving, all of a sudden you find yourself getting promoted anyway, because you're not stagnant as you become, if that makes sense.
I mean, I love work-life balance. I want to create teams that have work-life balance. I'm terrible myself at work-life balance. And that's partly because, I don't just want to do the same thing over and over again. And I think within what you feel comfortable doing for your work-life balance, I think, if you really want to do well and you're really prepared to work for it hard, then that enthusiasm does shine through. And it's not about the time you spend in the office and the time you spend at your desk, by the way. It's about, what you create and what you do in the hours that you give.
And reflecting on your career, were there different times in life that it was easier to push or not? I'm reflecting on myself. I have a young child. Until she came around, I gave everything and never really hesitated. I'd happily come in early, I'd happily stay late, I'd happily work weekends if needed, etc. I then had a long period of time that I was sleep deprived, could hardly function, could hardly remember my own name, let alone candidates' names, etc. But actually, if I'd have tried to get a promotion at that point in time, it would have backfired, because I wasn't the best version of me. Do you have to time progression? Do you have to?
Well, actually, it's interesting. There's lots of different things, and we haven't talked about bosses. I mean, I've been blessed in my life about having really good bosses. Not everyone does, and I think that's a very good reason to move. If you don't get on with your boss, really honestly, you need to move.
How do you start that discussion?
Well, I think I don't think you need to tell your boss particularly that you don't get on with them.
That's why I asked, right? So I'm in a different team. I want to come and join your team. Do I come and talk to you about joining your team, or do I talk to my boss?
I think you need to you need to kind of take that situation as it comes. A good manager would be very comfortable with you going to speak to other people and would actually actively encourage it. Not all managers do. So you need to work out what type of manager yours is. It's not good to annoy people, so at some point you're going to have to tell them that you're chatting, but you need to make sure. In some cases, a bad manager will kind of not react well, and will then continue to not react well after you've been looking around elsewhere. So you just need to manage that situation based on how you think they will react. But I think it's good to look around.
How did you become a good manager?
Well, you have to ask other people whether
if I could find someone that said you were.
You've got to listen.
You've
got to listen, and you've got to care. You've got to care about the success of the people. You've got to want people to have your job. That's the other thing. You ought to be prepared for the better person to take your job, and you've got to love that would happen. So, I think thinking about people, caring about them, it's not about management. It's just about life, really. But that is helpful, and it's not about you. It's about them.
Are they taught skills, or it's just the person that you are?
I think there could be lots of training that would help. And you talked about counselling earlier. I think there's lots of elements in the different types of counselling that people can have that work well in terms of training good managers. And actually, you know, if you look at some of the promotions that take place, firms realise when they might have a problem, and they do put people through good training programs to assist them to get better in those roles, or a good firm does. I don't think, you know, it's the first thing that gets cut, isn't it? The training budget, and that's a great shame.
Yeah, well, first thing that gets cut normally is recruitment budget, if I'm honest, but training probably comes second.
That's true.
But I find all of that side of things interesting, because so many candidates talk to us about where they want to go and what they want to achieve, but aren't having those discussions internally at all.
What on earth happened?
I think fear. I think people don't want to speak up and say.
No, but it's also it's accessibility. People have to know. I loved it when people came into my office.
Yeah.
And most people did.
Yeah.
You know, and then you find out at the end of the day you haven't done any work. But so you have to stay late. 100%. But actually, it's still good that they came into your office and they feel that you've got an open door. Yeah. And they can talk about anything, because actually, this is a sidebar. During COVID, you know, you're all at home.
Yep.
Having some version of a breakdown, in my case.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, it's really tough. You know, you're only looking at the screen. It's, in some cases, not even that. And what I realised is first of all, you need that human interaction. So, you know, all of this, everything we've been talking about, is about talking to people all the time, lots of different people. And COVID, you know, you needed to talk to people. So the more people you talk to, the better you felt. But you also found out what was going on for them during what was a really difficult time. Yeah, yeah. And you found people in really not great circumstances sometimes. Yeah. And you think, oh my God, if I hadn't known it, if I hadn't found that out, that would have been terrible. Yeah. And you know, sometimes it was just simple things like equipment. You know, they're at home, they didn't have the right desk, the right chair, blah, blah. Yeah. And sometimes it was more than that. And you can only find that out, but you should find that out by talking to people. And obviously now, thank goodness, we're not in that environment anymore. You know, people can come into offices and chat to you. So I think that is crucial if you're a manager. And if you're being managed and you can't speak to your manager, that's not great. And managers should be accessible. Yeah.
You referenced before work-life balance is important to you. You referenced then how hard that COVID time was. What's the right blend of office working, home working, collaboration, non-collaboration?
If I'm an MLRO, I want everybody in the office.
And why?
Because we worked out that when I came into the office, I usually spoke to 3 or 4 people between the door of my bit of the office and my actual office. Yeah. So if you do that 5 or 6 times during the day, that's a lot of information. Now, sometimes it's, did you have a nice holiday, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes I'm looking at this, I'm really worried about it. Yeah. If you imagine for 2 years, you missed the I'm really worried about it conversations. And we did lots of things to make sure that we didn't miss them. But none of them are as good as being in the office. If I'm a manager, I want people to be happy, so I want some kind of flexibility in the work. And somewhere between the 2 things that I've just said is the right answer.
Yeah, okay. And I'm just thinking, as an MLRO, do you need time on your own as well? Just if you're writing reports and you're taking whatever new policy, new rules, new regs, huge bits of text, and you've got to take it on board, you start reading it, you get to page 3, I'm knocking at your door saying, hey, Mark, I want to talk about how I get promoted. I appreciate I only joined a month ago, but let's have that chat. There's a balance of everything that's needed, or?
So before we set this session up, we had to check that our phones were off. Yeah. And I used the phrase trust and verify, and I held my phone up. Yeah. So if you're an MLRO, you have a lot of responsibility. Mm-hmm. You need to delegate, otherwise you'd go nuts. Yeah. But you do need to verify. Yeah. And so you do have to do a lot of work. It's a hard job. Yeah. It doesn't sit, my experience of it doesn't sit brilliantly with work-life balance.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And just thinking about what you just said about
That might be just the way I do it.
no, but I agree. I think but that's why I asked the question before about like life choices and timings, because there's times that I could have committed to doing 7 days a week, every hour available because I wanted to grow, progress, develop. And there's other times where I can hardly function, right?
If you work 7 days a week, you're going to fail.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I believed I would never have burnout, right? And then all of a sudden, I think every time I take a holiday, you take a holiday and halfway through you're like, I need to do this more often because I've just realised I wasn't the best version of me and I'm now recovering or whatever. But when I think about like learning, knowledge and exposure and trust and verify, as you've just said, one of the most awkward discussions we have with people about their growth and progression is assurance of just had a look at what I'm doing, found 3 or 4 things that need correcting because they believe it should have been done differently, and now I feel uncomfortable, so I'm thinking about changing roles. But actually, that's the whole point of the function, right? To spot the bits and pieces.
So, well, that's not right.
Yeah, but it's.
But then this whole environment where, so, you know, the number of times I've seen people who are managing relatively big teams with the door of their office locked and no one goes in. That's where it's all going wrong.
Yeah.
Because someone should be able to come in and say, oh, I'm just looking at this. Oh my goodness, you know.
Yeah.
And it, you know, 10 of those conversations, you know, I'm mentally tearing my hair out.
Yeah.
But the 11th one is, oh my God, I really needed to know that.
Yeah.
I'm glad they came in.
Yeah.
And you know, it should really be your direct reports that are flowing in and out of your office, in my view. But if it's other people from the team as well, great.
Yeah.
If your office has got 60 people in it, something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Particularly with your own managers, people are managing for you. But there's a balance and it works. And it creates a friendlier working environment.
Yeah. So if I'm to summarise everything we've spoken about, learn, read and communicate are the absolute keys to get ahead in financial crime.
Correct. Probably in any job, but
yeah. Pleasure, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.